Welcome back. All right, so let's talk about the Canucks for a bit here today. As they have signed Pettersson, they have signed Hughes, and so the salary cap situation, we'll see whether or not they can add. The one thing I've always wanted to see with the Canucks as a Canucks fan is that they have money to add maybe a big name player if they become available. Not Tavares level, not necessarily Taylor Hall level, but sign a couple of, bigger names. And I think some of the contracts that are on the team maybe make that a little more difficult. But I will say this, in how these contracts get signed, Benning was pretty smart with it. He really was. So we'll go through why. So currently over the cap, Ferland's LTIR is going to kick in. That's $3.5 million. Just gets them under the cap. They have $3.585 million in dead cap. So Luongo's recapture ends this next summer at $3,035,212. Holtby has the buyout that's $1.9 million until 2023 as a cap penalty. Virtanen cap penalty of $500,000 until 2023. The bonus overages $648,780. That's your whole bonus that rolls over into the next season. But next year, Brock Boeser's up. Now, Boeser's a restricted free agent, which kind of limits how much he can get. It also, this is next summer where he has arbitration rights. So it shouldn't be this prolonged battle between the two sides. It should get resolved pretty quickly. But it may only be a one-year deal that kicks it further down the road a little bit. And then you get into that $5.875 million. I would say with the current market being what it is, as long as Boeser can stay healthy and produce, which staying healthy has been an issue for him, but if he can stay healthy and produce, Boeser likely gets a raise, right? Then you have Mott. He's a UFA next summer, $1.225 million. Sutter, UFA next summer, $1.125 million. Rathbone, $925,000, restricted free agent. If he plays for the Canucks this year and if he plays regularly, he's going to make some money. Hunt, $800,000, UFA next summer. We'll see if he actually makes the team or if he ends up in Abbotsford. Levy, $750,000. He's a restricted free agent next summer. Halak, $1.5 million. He's UFA next year. I think that's just the 1 year to get them to where Michael DiPietro becomes the backup. So DiPietro has been, playing at the AHL level and playing very well. And I think next year he gets his opportunity to be the Canucks backup. Chiasson's still on a PTO as I'm recording this. I don't know that they sign him. If they sign him, somebody else gets sent down, right? So I do wonder if he actually gets signed. And then they've Highmore, who at $725,000, restricted free agent next summer. I like him as a fourth line option or as an extra player. We'll see if they keep him around. Currently, if the cap stays at $81.5 million, the Canucks would have $13,298,333 in cap space next summer. It's likely the cap will go up to $82.5 million, which is the maximum that it can go up until the whole pandemic loss of money has been taken care of, which could be a while. It could be until 2025 or 2026, and it could be longer than that. This could go on for a bit. So Boeser, if you think $6 million plus, that would take the Canucks down into a $7 million range for next summer. Then you gotta, re-sign Mott, which I think they will probably do. That's another at least $1 million. So that's where the issue for me comes in of, okay, so this core had better be good enough to win. If you're a fan of the Canucks, if you think, well, I don't know about the core, then there's a problem. And the other problem being that I think they really need to bring in a defensive defenseman to play with Hughes that is a very well-known top four level defenseman, and those guys aren't cheap. So unless they find a way out of one of their other contracts, or unless they find a taker for another contract, I don't know how they bring in a top four defenseman to play with Hughes. That may end up being Hamonic's role at some point this year, but I don't know when. So 2023 is an interesting year for the Canucks. Horvat's due as a UFA, $5.5 million. They do not want to lose Bo Horvat. You really don't want to lose Horvat. So I would think with Horvat, he should be at that point into the $6.5-7 million range for what he can get. JT Miller, $5.25 million UFA. I would say probably at that point he would be moved on from. So that would free them up with $5.25 million. Hoglander's the interesting one there. $891,667 is his current cap hit. The Canucks like that quite a bit. But he's a restricted free agent at the end of this deal. How much is he going to be worth? How much is he going to cost? Hamonic is due in 2023. He makes $3 million UFA. We'll see what happens with him with the Canucks. Luke Schenn, $850,000. I think that's a good deal for Schenn. He's a UFA, of course, at the end of that. If Hamonic doesn't play, I mentioned this in a video this morning. Schenn has already shown early on for Hughes' career. Schenn and Hughes played together, and it didn't look bad. They look pretty good together, so we'll see if that is the case. And then that's where your dead cap money disappears. That's where, Luongo ends in 2022, and then Holtby and Virtanen come off the books in 2023. Do the Canucks initiate another buyout at some point over the next couple of years, right? I don't think so. I think they've gotten rid of any contracts they might have wanted to buy out, but we'll see what happens from here. 2024 is where Pettersson's due, $7.35 million. But it's a smart move because Pearson's $3.25 million comes off the books that year. Dickinson, $2.65 million comes off the books that year. Myers, $6 million comes off the books that year. Podkolzin is due as his entry-level contract should end then, providing he makes it to camp and they burn the first year of the contract this year. $925,000, restricted free agent. We're all hoping in Vancouver that he'd get a raise, right? That he justified and qualifies for a raise. 2025, Pullman comes off the books, $2.5 million. 2026 is where you have Garland at $4.95 million, and you have Demko at $5 million. And then in 2027, you have Hughes, but Hughes becomes a UFA in 2027, $7.85 million. That's when the Ekman-Larsson contract, $7.26 million is the cap hit for the Canucks. And that $7.26 million again, if Ekman-Larsson comes in and plays like the old Ekman-Larsson this year for Vancouver, that deal's going to look good. If Ekman-Larsson shows some of the issues he had in Arizona aren't necessarily resolved, then that cap hit's going to look rough. I know Benning saying that he envisioned him as being a number one defenseman kind of had me a bit concerned because I think, honestly, for the Canucks, I think eventually the number one defenseman's Hughes. I agree that he's probably not number one defenseman material right now because people point out, like, oh, defensively he's rough. Right, but he scores around a point a game. You're going to pay for a defenseman who scores around a point per game. The idea that doesn't add value is, I don't know. The defensive side of his game, a lot of young defensemen have to learn that they come in with that, or they may learn the offensive side. You don't usually get defensemen coming into the league who are absolutely seamless in that transition, both offensively and defensively. They need to learn along the way. If you watch the Leafs documentary on Amazon Prime, you can see even the veterans learn along the way. Props to John Tavares for realizing, hey, I'm over 30. I've got to reinvent my game a little bit if I'm going to stay in the league and stay as productive as I've been. The interesting thing, too, is that these contracts don't even take into account Phil DiGiuseppe, who looks like is playing himself into a roster spot. He's due next year. Justin Dowling has been signed for 2 years, so they must have some vision of either having him in the NHL level as an extra forward or maybe being in a leadership role in Abbotsford. Zach McEwen is an RFA next summer. I like McEwen. We haven't seen that progression from McEwen's game yet that I think we wanted to see. Nick Patan is due next summer. Sheldon Dries, Justin Bailey, Brady Keeper, of course, right now has a fractured leg. He's out for a while, but he's signed until 2023. Burrows signed till 2023. I've actually been kind of impressed with Burrows. And Bowie is signed for one more year. Of course, they brought him in to kind of meet the expansion draft requirements. But, yeah, I think he's made a good acquitting of himself. Probably gets a call up from Abbotsford at some point this year. Of course, in the prospects list, this is where it gets interesting in that Danila Klimovich, who was a draft pick from this past summer, they want to keep an eye on him, and he didn't look out of place in the scrimmage I watched. It's just a little scrimmage. It looked fine. William Lockwood, who's been turning some heads with some of the hits he's been throwing already. He's a restricted free agent next summer. Yona Gadjevich, this might be the best chance for Gadjevich to maybe get into the lineup. He's due next year as an RFA. Jet Wu, love the name. I don't know if he actually gets into any games this year, but it will be interesting to see what happens with him. I mentioned Michael DiPietro. Yoni Yermo, unsigned, but at least in terms of their prospects, it looks like he's doing pretty well. He's advanced all right. And of course, still out there is the Nikita Trampkin issue, which, well, he stayed in the KHL, so any expectation that maybe he might return ends up getting scuttled, which is too bad because his size and his physical side of his game, I think, would have been good on their blue line. I think what Vancouver's got going for them right now is I think they're a good enough team that they should be able to push for a playoff spot. But I really do wonder, like, throughout all of this, are they going to be able to build to being a Stanley Cup team? And does the fact that they don't have the cap space to bring in guys, at least for this season, right, where they're envisioning, you don't add Garland and OEL because you think that you're going to miss the playoffs. You add Garland and OEL because you think you've got a shot at the playoffs, especially when you're trading a top 10 draft pick in order to make that happen. So the expectation is playoffs this year. I do wonder, so are they envisioning that they're going to get to that Stanley Cup contention, or is this going to be a continued every year kind of patch things together and envision playoffs? Because at some point you have to kind of make that move between being good enough to make the playoffs or actually being in that contention spot where you're contending for first in the division, you're getting through the first round, the second round, you're in conference finals. And so I do wonder with the Canucks, but we'll see what happens. I think it's a fascinating picture that they've got going on for themselves. We'll see how everything turns out, and I do wish them all the best. It is a tough league to win in. You now have 32 teams, and it gets harder and harder to win the Stanley Cup. And Seattle, I don't think they're going to be pushovers either. I don't have Seattle as a playoff team this year, but I don't think they're going to be pushovers. I don't think they're going to win 10, 15 games and be an easy 2 points every night. I think they're going to be tough. But yeah, so we'll see what happens. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below regarding the Canucks cap situation. And again, Pettersson, when that expires, they have money. Hughes, when that expires, they have money. That's a good move. Smart moves by Benning, and that's why these contracts are structured the way that they are. So let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.